Hi, I'm Michael, and welcome to Beyond the Screenplay, the podcast where each episode we do a conversational deep dive analysis into a film. Today we are talking about Pulp Fiction, the 1994 film written and directed by Quentin Tarantino. I'm joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Arand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
All right, stop me when I get to 200. Hello, 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 hello. I lost count. All right.
And Alex Gallegos.
Hi.
So we're getting down to it in our big swing summer. Last week we talked about Romeo plus Juliet. That was a lot of fun. Next week we're coming back with The Fountain, which I have not seen in a long time. It's going to be really interesting to revisit. And Alex, I know it's a favorite of yours. But for episode 200 of our podcast, which is crazy, and we have a dedicated patron who keeps track of how many episodes we've actually recorded, and this is actually like 301. But the public episodes that we're counting, episode 200, we're talking about Pulp Fiction. I have a love-hate relationship with this movie. Revisiting it was interesting, and I realized that I had this kind of vague notion in my head of like, I think I kind of don't like this movie and I never want to watch it again, but I can't remember why, because when I think about this movie, I think about, Samuel L. Jackson, John Travolta, like all those scenes. And I'm like, those are all great. Why do I what's my resistance here? Watching it again, I remembered what the resistance was, which was the entire Bruce Willis storyline. I have issues with I just don't enjoy it as much, and it feels kind of out of step for me with the rest of it. And I'm curious to hear how you guys feel about that or look at it. But it was also just interesting seeing again all those scenes and sequences that I love. Like the first hour of this movie is just so great. And it's just scene after scene and sequence after sequence of really smart, clever writing. I did a video on Inglourious Bastards at one point for Lessons from the Screenplay, talking about how Tarantino can take a scene of people sitting and talking and stretch it out and make it just so engaging and engrossing. And there's just a lot of really good structure happening that is keeping the engagement there for the audience and asking questions and implying things, and you want to know and you want to get to the end. So it's really, really great at periods of time. And then the whole Bruce Willis section for me basically doesn't work, and I stop enjoying the movie entirely. And then at the end, they shoot Marvin in the face, and I kind of laugh and I am kind of brought back into it. And then Quentin Tarantino has his cameo, and that's fun if you want to hear a director use the N-word a bunch. And so that kind of throws me again. But overall, whenever Samuel Jackson and John Travolta are on screen, I'm having a good time. And so this is a weird movie. It's a weird movie, and it's interesting to think about it in through the lens of 1994 and just what it did, also how it was different from so much and how it became this cultural landmark, changed cinema, changed the way we thought about storytelling and indie films and all this stuff. So I'm still kind of trying to figure out how I feel about this movie and where to how to navigate it. But the things that it does well, it does undeniably well. And for those parts, it was really fun to revisit. So yeah, curious to hear kind of what we all make of this. Brian, tell me about Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, I mean, you say love-hate. I don't have a love-hate relationship with this movie. I love this movie, but Tarantino, I'm not so sure about anymore. And I feel like there's definitely, the longer you've spent with a director's oeuvre over the years, then the more you go back and you're like, I love this movie. And you're like, oh, right. But then there's that thing that you do that is not cool or that I don't really like or whatever it is. And, I'm sure we'll get into some of the more problematic aspects of this movie, but also I love the movie. It's just one of those, movies watched in college with your friends and you quote it all the time. And I had the poster with, with Jules and Vincent on it, black and white, big Subway sized poster. And yeah, it's a really entertaining movie to me. As you said, it's really gripping. I'm always just kind of into it. Sure, maybe I'm not as gripped during the Butch segment, but I also like that a lot. and it does some interesting stuff with theme where it kind of feels like the movie's about nothing for a really long time, specifically because the characters are talking about nothing. Like they're just like, this is a kind of funny dialogue scene about McDonald's or whatever. And it's like, cool, but this literally has nothing to do with anything. I'm just enjoying watching this. And then at the end, you know, Jules gives his monologue and you're like, oh, this movie is about something. And then you kind of go back or you rewatch it and you're like, oh, I see how a lot of these things are kind of like pushing against the themes. A lot of it isn't, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but then a lot of it you can kind of say, if I want to look at the movie through this thematic lens, I can see how this choice and how this character and how, you know, this character arc and this, just all the different things that happen throughout the movie can kind of support that, or in some cases maybe not support it as much. You know, the flagrant use of the N-word in this movie would be stronger, I think, if only the rednecks said it. So then that was the you're like, oh, they're descending into hell now. Like all these guys are bad, but these guys are bad. When everyone says it, doesn't really mean anything. Again, not something we need to talk about right at the top of the episode, but it's just the kind of thing where I'm like, oh, I'm actually seeing how this is actively pushing against some of the themes of the movie rather than supporting it. So ultimately still love the movie, despite some of those things, and just always a joy to rewatch for me.
Nice. Cool. Trisha, what about you?
Yeah. Lots to say. This is a very, very entertaining movie. I was going into it with like, yeah, my modern day, like latter day Tarantino problems. I was just kind of carrying them with me, of which I have many. And I was like, God, could it really be that good? And I remember similarly when we did our episode on Reservoir Dogs, which was back in 2022. It's a patron exclusive episode. I went back and found it. I believe it's from like August or something, like from 2022. We talked about Reservoir Dogs, and I feel like basically all of us started that episode by being like, we have problems with Tarantino, but goddamn, isn't this movie good? Like, yeah. Which it is. And this one, I feel the same way. Like, I find Tarantino insufferable as an entity, as a person, as a filmmaker that I have to contend with, like, you know, in cultural, like in any sort of cultural sphere, that I have to like acknowledge his presence and that I have to spend the next hour talking about him. I'm annoyed by that fact. That being said, I was never bored at all during this rewatch, and I was like laughing a lot, and for the most part having a really good time. This movie is suspenseful as hell. Like virtually every scene, Tarantino is so good at stakes. Like the dramatic question in every scene is so clear, so compelling, and the stakes have been established by the time we walk into any room. And they're so high in every room that there's basically not, like, it's all just like edge of your seat fun. And yeah, I have some like problems with it. And I think actually it's pretty thematically muddy for along long stretches. And I also am not even convinced that Tarantino has been very clear over the years that he actually doesn't care about themes. And I don't know that I believe him when he says that, but I think, you know, there's lots of analysis that you can do on this movie. I'm not sure themes really like crystallized for me, other than sort of like a generic redemption story for Jules. But anyway, I think it's all really fascinating. It's incredibly well done. I'm hoping we can add something to the conversation about this movie because it has been talked about to death. But now with the benefit of, you know, at least 2 decades, I think it's good to revisit it now.
Nice. Yeah. Cool. Okay. And Alex, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, this movie was kind of an important movie for me in my cinematic development. I think seeing it kind of in the same era, the late high school, early college era, also watching Linklater films like Before Sunset, just kind of having my mind open to, oh my God, you can make a simple scene between 2 people talking for an extended period of time be so compelling and go into this form and style of dialogue that you don't see in most films, that is both kind of very realistic, but also not, also kind of theatrical and almost literary. And just watching a movie that was captivating me with this kind of almost stage play, real time, just engrossing me through and through. And when you're young, it's also just exciting to see a movie do daring things, to announce up front with this kind of definition of Pulp Fiction, like it's gonna be kind of a mess, and we're gonna just do these separate stories. And oh wait, over time you realize they're actually interconnected and out of this nonlinear. All of that was just so exciting, and so I think this movie was my introduction to Tarantino, and it made me a Tarantino fan when I saw it. I also, was disturbed by elements in the movie. When I first saw it, I didn't understand certain things. Like I didn't understand that white powder is different from that white powder. And that's why it's a problem for Uma Thurman to snort it. I thought like, oh, you just do too much cocaine, your nose starts bleeding and you die. And so it was interesting to revisit it now, because I haven't watched it for many years. And I had the same kind of experience as you were talking about, Michael, where like during the first half of the movie, I was kind of just in cinema heaven. I had my surround sound blasting. The music when the opening credits comes on is so loud. I was like, I feel like I'm in the Vista Theater in the Tarantino like world of just like a classic cinema experience. And I was so happy. And then, yeah, as it goes on, I think when it gets to kind of the Christopher Walken watch scene is the first time I lean back a little bit. Like it takes so long to get to the punchline. And we'll get into it, but I think, yeah, as the movie goes on, even when we return to Jules, I'm not as charmed by Jules and Vincent in that latter half. It ends strong. It ends great with that final scene in the diner that brings it all full circle. But there's definitely like a late Act 2 period where I leave cinema heaven and start to kind of feel a little annoyed. So yeah, similar feelings, but I do have a pretty strong connection to this movie as one of those formative experiences as a young aspiring filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
Before we move on from this real quick, just because it's kind of what we're all talking about, is this first act, I was sort of taking notes of just why I was always hooked, like why it's like it hooks you in. It's like you open up on Pumpkin and Honey Bunny, just they're in the middle of a scene. They're going to do something. What are they going to do? Oh, this movie's funny. They're talking about kind of their lifestyle and how they don't really have any other options. They're figuring out what they're going to do right now. Like let's do this thing right now here in the place we are currently sitting. And then everybody freeze, goes straight into Miserlou, which then goes straight into the Amsterdam conversation, which then goes into the long take of them coming up the stairs. And they're kind of just like, they're professional hitmen, but they're just like talking, they're just chatting. It's kind of a day at the office. They're like going into a life and death situation, whatever. But they're also setting up Mia and Marcellus. They're not just having a McDonald's conversation for 15 minutes, And then that goes into the apartment. And it's like, it just keeps going. I think it's like when Vincent goes to buy like heroin from Eric Stoltz. It's like maybe the first time where I was like, this is the first time. And it's like 40 minutes in the movie. This is the first time where the movie's not like you need to know exactly what happens next. And, and even then we know Mia is happening soon. And we're like, how's that going to go? There's always, and I think that the Bruce Willis of it all doesn't have as much of that. And I think that's part of it. It's like the whole third act is the Bonnie situation, right? Like we got to hurry up. We got to get this done. And that goes into the final diner. The Butch segment has some of that, but not as much, like the Gold Watch monologue and the long scene with Fabienne where they're just kind of talking and hanging out, which I really find very charming. And it's a kind of a breath of fresh air in this movie. But it's one of the few times the movie isn't just always like dramatic question, carrot stick, like what's going to happen next kind of thing. But the first act does that, I think, beautifully.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that sequence because I actually like that part of the Bruce Willis story, the kind of the romantic part before it goes, to hell.
Yeah, I think you're identifying that, something that is very well known about this movie is that it's out of order, non-linear, jumps around. But for most of that first hour, it is building upon itself. And you're sort of dropped into these situations and it takes a moment to get oriented, but that's part of the fun. And as you're saying, there's this trajectory, this momentum of like it's going toward a thing, and you can kind of always feel that. And then along the way, you're picking up details of, Marcellus Wallace is clearly a big character, and Vincent's going to be like spending time with me. We know the stakes of that because we just had a whole conversation about foot massages, and like that's a interesting conversation to be hearing about on its own. But it's also setting up the stakes of what Vincent is going to do later, and so I think just so much of that is pointed toward the next sequence while also being fun in the present and doing long-term setup stuff. And yeah, I think the Butch section, and I admit that I don't know this movie as well. I've only seen it a few times, but to me, you could lift the Butch section from the movie and nothing would be different, really. It feels like Jules and Vincent are kind of our main through line characters in a lot of ways. And so the Butch section answers, how Jules dies, but otherwise it doesn't feel like it's really pertaining to the goings on. I don't need it to understand the Marvin scene because the Marvin scene happens before all the Butch stuff. And so that's just always been a weird thing for me, was that it feels like that is a neat section if you're into that, but it does, I think that's why I lean back and it feels a little bit more indulgent, because it doesn't feel like it's doing multiple things at once as much for me as I watch it.
Right.
And I feel like it's definitely, I think that part of the movie on is where the meta of it all, of the Tarantino, we haven't had enough gratuitous violence yet. We haven't had enough, whatever. I haven't had my cameo yet. The things that are annoying to me about Tarantino just in life start to come into the movie more in that stretch. And so that's part of why I think also it bugs me more than the first half of the movie.
Yeah. There's also the thing about that section, especially as it builds along towards, the confrontation, both with Vincent in the apartment and then with Marcellus on the street, which then spills into the pawn shop, which then spills downstairs to the rednecks. And it's all of that feels the most meta to me, where, to your point, Alex, it feels like it's doing the most on the nose movie references. I mean, the references are here throughout, but it kind of, it makes me more aware of its references, and it feels like it's kind of doing that on purpose in some ways. So a lot has been talked about where the scene where I do love the moment where Butch decides to go back and save Marcellus, because I think it's wonderfully acted by Bruce Willis, and you just want something good for Butch, because he just killed my favorite character in that apartment over there, and and so you're just come on, Butch, and these people are the most evil people, right? They're the most evil, and so first of all, yeah, we could get back to the coincidences in the movie because I think they're interesting. But the moment where he decides to go back and save Marcellus, he then goes through the I'm going to pick up all these 6 different weapons in the pawn shop or whatever. And each one feels like it's very clearly referencing something from a movie, right? Where he picks up the hammer first, and then eventually he gets to the chainsaw, and then he
zombie movie.
Yeah, it feels very I can feel Tarantino being don't you love this about movies? Don't you aren't you excited if he picks up this weapon? Aren't you excited if he picks up this weapon? It's not a reasonable thing that a character in a world would do that wasn't this world, right? And the sequence itself with the Hicks is it's just Deliverance. He was just I'm just gonna do Deliverance again. You all know what this is. You all know what these rednecks are. You all know what it just I feel like it's trading so much on the things that it's referencing, and that isn't that pleasant to watch, right? There's so much about, there are references earlier and homages and you kind of meta-textual things happening throughout the movie. But they've, the Jackrabbit Slim sequence is just that, where it's like, here's all the things. But they feel like they're being like given a little bit of an extra twist, or they're a little bit more playful or fun. And here in the Butch sequence, the prize fighter who throws the fight and then has to go get the watch and do the thing. I don't know. It starts to feel like just a more knockoff is not the right word, but to your point, Alex, like he just wants to put one more like sequence in here that's from a movie he liked, or from a bunch of movies he liked, and remind you that that's why he's doing it.
Yeah. I do like the pacing though of the Butch thing, where it's just kind of like, I'm gonna go save Marcellus, I guess, but I don't need to rush. I'm gonna do the right thing, but like I'm kind of upset. So anyway, let me shop around a little bit. But no, I think something like you're pointing out something about this movie that I think if you like those things, it makes the movie better. And if you are looking for this movie to be tight and thematically sound and everything, then it makes it worse. But what I do think holistically, it is this feeling of just like, this movie doesn't feel like anything else, even when it's directly referencing other things, right? We talked about a movie like Scott Pilgrim just exists in its own universe, and you kind of have to figure out the rules as you go. So does that. Like Tarantino movies in general kind of feel like they exist essentially in our universe, but also we're not going to worry too much about things being realistic. Like, yeah, there's going to be a twist contest, and like both the characters just happen to know how to twist real well, and and like whatever the main character's job is, like all that kind of stuff. It's just like, this is just the Tarantino verse, and it exists over here. So there is something about the Jackrabbit Slim sequence that makes me go, this is novel and this is interesting. And then there are other times where Mia's just singing along to Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon. And I'm like, I don't know what this is doing at all, but I really like watching it. Like, I really like him, like struck by the mood of this moment. But then, yeah, I mean, I think it'd be good to get into the theme of it all, which I think that what the Butch sequence gets you is Fabian, who is like our sort of good, pure heart in this movie, in the way that kind of nobody else is. And then counter that with the rednecks, who are this pure evil, like you're literally descending down, and it reminds me of Babylon, Trisha, the cave sequence, right?
Oh, yeah.
If you know, you know. But then it's like now everyone else is kind of in between these two. So it's like when you give the two extremes, then you can kind of see where people exist in the middle. And Butch doesn't seem terribly upset about killing the guy who was fighting, right? And you're kind of like, I don't know if I'm on your side or not. But then he makes that choice to go back, and it's like, okay, that's kind of his redemption. Jules and Vincent, we see very clearly. Vincent is like, what are you talking about? We didn't witness miracle, whatever. And during that conversation, we know that in the movie he has already died, right? So it's like, we know. And then Jules is the one saying, hey, I'm going to leave this behind. I'm going to go do my own thing. So I do think there's a lot to play with there. And again, it's not as thematically sound as I think we want it to be, but I do feel like when you go and to me, Reservoir Dogs is almost like, here's a bunch of bad people and they all die, like almost Shakespearean in that way, or like the Tim Roth is kind of like struggling with where his morality lies. In this movie, I feel like there is kind of there is a different arc for everyone, and it is at least speaking to that theme, even when it's not speaking as strongly as we would like it to. So curious everyone's thoughts about just like what you actually take from this movie, other than Sam Jackson's monologue at the end makes you go, I agree, or whatever.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I kind of feel what you felt, Trisha, was that it does feel thematically muddy. And, during that Samuel L. Jackson monologue at the end, I was like, okay, I think this is reaching for like some meaning. I think I was still kind of fatigued from the Butch section at that point. So I was sort of like ready for the movie to be over. And I feel like that scene does go on a little bit. But I feel like more than like a theme stated kind of thing, I would say almost the mood and vibes of the movie is where the meaning comes from, or like, yeah, there's just something about being in the world of this movie that does make you feel a certain way and makes it seems meaningful, and makes me think about things, but it's kind of an ineffable feeling. And so I think that's, for me, for me, that's where I was kind of landing in terms of like, what is this movie trying to say? I feel like it's more in like how it makes you feel and the kind of mode it puts you in than like any specific character arc does, for me anyway.
I'd agree with you because, once again, for the first half of this movie, I'm almost hypnotized with the kind of flow and the pace and the way the camera moves. You mentioned the scene where Uma Thurman's just singing to herself, just the way the camera moves with her back and forth, kind of just horizontally through that room. It just, the lens choice seems perfect and the sound is great. And I'm just happy to watch this for a while. And I wrote down just the words like pure cinema a couple times in my notes, but I genuinely felt it and meant it. And just like, it's so nice once in a while to sink into a movie that way, where the movie isn't giving me a lot to intellectually chew on, really. It's just kind of this pure experiential thing. And I really enjoy long stretches of this movie just kind of vibing with it, just being in it, and enjoying kind of just hanging out with these characters as they sit together and talk. And it's kind of magic because so many movies, aren't shot, cut, acted, cast in such a way to make scenes like this compelling, and this movie is. And I like to just be in it, and I kind of don't need a theme. I almost, the movie at the outset is almost stating to me like, don't expect much from me as far as coherence or theme, but do expect like experience. Even the cold open kind of teaches me that with the way that scene plays out. And then there's the real timeness of it all. So I don't know. I think sometimes I do just, it's fun to remember that cinema can just be this kind of real time thing that you soak in for a while.
Well, and I think it's that mood of the hanging out and just liking spending time with these people juxtaposed with who these people are also. Like, these are hitmen that we watched murder several people. Yeah. And so I think there is something...
And stakes are present, as we've been saying. Like, these are not scenes just where you're dropped in and it's like, two people hanging out. It could be anybody. It's like very specific people in a specific context. And we've been told you'll be thrown off the balcony if you touch your feet. And so, yeah, it's definitely... there's work going on around these scenes to make them so hyper compelling.
Yeah. I spent today too much time of my day today, to be honest, reading about this movie and what critics said about it at the time and have said since. And one of the themes that was raised in a review that I read was about innocence and depravity, and like sort of two sides of the coin of the movie, and thinking about the Jackrabbit Slim sequence and why it's so much fun to watch, and basically why Jules and Vincent are so much fun to watch, is because oftentimes what they're talking about is something completely innocent, right? And almost childlike. They're just debating about what hamburgers are called in Europe. And, in the Jackrabbit Slim sequence, they're like drinking a milkshake. Right? It's this like 1950s, like seems very sanitized and pure, like the enjoyment of going to the sock hop type of a vibe. And I think, Fabienne talking about blueberry pancakes and all these really cute, innocent seeming things. Even when Mia does her like, don't be a square, right? thing, you're just like, she's talking to Vincent. Like, we just saw all the murder, right? And the drug buying and all of this stuff. And then if you've seen the movie, you know where it's going with Mia also, where she's going to OD and they have to stab her and whatever. It's a great sequence. But I think that duality of innocence and like moral depravity or like moral bankruptcy is really fascinating. And then I saw a critic that kind of connected that idea with just it isn't really a theme per se, because it isn't a debate, but the movie contending essentially that crime and human criminals are also human. And that reviewer was really more of like a film critic, said like criminals are a part of the human family. And I like that also as kind of a position of the movie, right? That basically everyone in it is a bad person, but they also do bad and good things. And mostly what they do is human things, right? They go to the bathroom a lot, and also talk about it a lot, right? Like Vincent's virtually in the bathroom every time something goes horribly awry. And also so many of the scenes are like in the bathroom, but just the humanness of like, I accidentally shot Marvin in the face. I have to like clean up all this blood and it's a total drag. And we're going to stand here and argue about coffee, or we're going to just have to go to the diner and eat. Like everybody has to eat, everybody has to drink, everybody has to like go to the bathroom. It's just, there's this like real human quality to the characters, even though they're not, right? Like this is not our reality, as you're pointing out. But the position of the movie that kind of reminds you always of the like human foibles of the people that you're watching, I think is another big part of the reason why we're compelled by it. I feel like it's really easy to hook into these people who are just sitting in a diner and they don't want to do what they're doing, but okay, let's rob it one more time. And people who are just kind of caught up in what's going on around them, and they have misgivings and they make mistakes. The Coen brothers are my favorite filmmakers, and they have really human criminals in their movies as well, but their movies are also more in like a stated realm about like, we're talking about God and nihilism and like fate and these things. That's usually in the dialogue. And Tarantino employs a lot of the same techniques. The Coen brothers are already working filmmakers at this point. I think they're really similar in some ways. But I think Tarantino is really more just interested in like, look at this stuff. And you can kind of read it how you want.
Yeah. So as you guys were talking, I'm thinking about the three sections of this movie and what they're doing in my mind, or at least what I was thinking about while I was watching them. And I think it's like Act 1, if we look at just Jules and Vincent, Act 1, we have Vincent kind of like going, like you said, kind of depravity, right? Like Jules is controlling the situation in that apartment. Vincent's just kind of hanging out. And then he, does too many drugs and everything. And then he and Mia are just having a little bit too much fun and everything goes wrong. And then in the third act, Vincent is, doesn't really care about the miracle. He's kind of almost the wild card in the robbery sequence where Jules is like trying to hold it under control. Meanwhile, we've seen Jules now in the third act be like, hey, like they are literally cleaning up after themselves, right? There is this sort of like very literal redemption, almost like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill to clean out that car kind of thing going on. And then Jules makes the decision to go, and Vincent makes the decision to not, and we've seen how that affects him. So then what is the Act 2 doing? I think I wish I knew what the gold watch meant a little bit more, because it's something that Butch has to go back for. Is it I've seen it, it's like it's his luck thing, it's karma, it's like, okay, great, but like what is that? There are these arcs happening with our main two characters in the first and third act. So what is the second act doing to sort of amplify that, right? So to make us go into the third act with that there. I do think the choice for Butch to go back is his sort of like, I'm going to go earn my own redemption now. Maybe the watch was him it is literally gold, him trying to just like snatch something that he didn't really earn. It was just given to him by his heroic fathers. And now he has to go be his own hero or something. So again, there's a lot to engage with. I wish the second act did a better job of making me know why it's there, and what it is doing to speak to the first and third acts.
Mm-hmm. And it makes me wonder, is it the watch there because it's a MacGuffin? And it's a MacGuffin that has a funny story behind it.
But MacGuffins are there to do something for a character arc or for a story or for theme or whatever.
It's to drive Butch's story into where it goes so that Tarantino can have a really awful villain that he can then tell the audience it's okay to like viciously murder this villain. Which chainsaw or sword do you want me to use on him? Like, I think that's partly why that section feels less pure to me. Like, the pure cinemaness dissolves for me a bit there, because I can feel I'm being dragged into this kind of Tarantino mud, and he's like, you like this, don't you? Like, don't you do depravity person? Like, you want to see people get murdered with chainsaws, don't you? It's like, I don't actually. Like, I'm not into the revenge thing. I'm not into I don't need to see the shotgun blow up his genitals. Like, and I think Tarantino positions the movie as if I am him, and I definitely am like, ooh, yeah, baby. And so I think that's where I get like detached from the movie, because it's that Tarantino thing of like, this is me, Tarantino, what I like am salivating over, and I'm no longer kind of keeping you in this hypnotic experience that I kind of lured you into. I'm now kind of in my Tarantino like sandbox playground, and we're gonna get dirty now, which is fine. And you know what? Like, it's all good. It's all the Tarantino thing. That's just where I personally like resent him a little bit, because it's like, you lured me in with this kind of pure experience, and then you just couldn't help yourself. We had to go into the Tarantino like stuff that is like required, I guess, of all of your movies. No matter how much I love them up to a certain point, you lose me at this point, and this movie has that thing, as they all do.
Well, and that's the thing about the Gold Watch. Most MacGuffins, if they're just a MacGuffin, Chris Walken is not going to show up on screen and tell you about it for 10 minutes, right? Like, the movie is telling me this item is important. Someone is going to tell me how important it is, and then another character is it's going to be so important they're going to go risk their life to go back and get it. So if it is just a MacGuffin, then like you said, Tarantino's just wasting our time with entertaining stuff. Like, I like that monologue, I like thing. But then if it isn't there for anything, then don't make it feel so important. And if it is important, what's it that? Like, that's the, I think, where the thematic struggle happens in this movie. Struggle.
Yeah, I mean, I think that as I mentioned, the Butch storyline, I have a lot of problems with and loses me and a lot of stuff. But I think, as you're pointing out, Brian, like, the movie like hangs a lantern on this watch is important. We're going to have a whole scene dedicated to like what this watch went through and who this watch went through in order to get to you. And so like,
hold on. Bravo.
So I think we are supposed to assign meaning to that. And the surface level meaning is that we understand why it's so important that Butch is willing to go back and risk his life to get it. But I don't think that that's really like a meaningful. It's a meaningful choice, but it doesn't feel super related to the arc. Like, that choice is like, okay, Butch understands how important this is and his relationship to his father and what his father went through. Like, neat, okay. But as we're pointing out, his decision to go back and save Marcellus Wallace at his own pace is like a character choice. And so I think it is maybe trying to draw parallels, because the watch was set up as, a thing in war and like associated with violence. Like, maybe there's some parallels there, but his choice to go back also isn't related to to go back and save Marcellus Wallace isn't related to the watch either. And it's not necessarily like a moral choice that was reflected by his father or his grandfather. So like, I think there's things swimming around each other that each almost have the pieces that they need, but don't really click into place in a clear, meaningful way. And I think because there's also so much time between the Christopher Walken monologue that introduces the watch And when Butch finally makes those decisions, I feel like moving them out of proximity loses some of that impact also. So yeah, I think there's lots of reasons why that sequence kind of meaning-wise gets a little muddy. And I think as we're identifying, I think it is also making room to do other stuff that like the filmmakers want to do. That'll be fun.
Yeah. The nonlinear structure, I think, is a give and take in terms of what you get from it, but also what you lose from it, as you guys are kind of getting at there. So, I had never really thought much about Vincent's skepticism of the miracle as being connected to his death following the diner scene later on that same day, ? The next day?
Because
earlier? When does Butch throw the fight? Anyway, but
no, it's like much later.
It would have to be.
Yeah.
But anyway, I have never really connected Vincent's response to the miracle with his eventual death. Neither have I connected the incidences with Vincent and Mia to the miracle that happened to him earlier that day, right? Like, I think that is the same day. He takes Mia out that night, I want to say. So the nonlinear structure is very disruptive in certain cases when it comes to creating meaning. I think it works very beautifully in the Jules storyline because of the way that it cuts back to, we see that guy hiding in the bathroom yet again. And then he comes out and he unloads his gun completely at them and somehow misses them. So we're reminded, like even the repeating of the monologue, hearing it again through that wall, we're kind of reminded of Jules's whole thing. And then it stays again with Jules for pretty much the rest of the movie from that point on until, whatever. And so I think the nonlinear structure does get you some stuff. And as we've talked about, it's great at creating tension. It's great at creating intrigue. The stakes, it's where information is introduced in this movie could not be more perfect. I can't get over it. It's wild how you have every bit of information exactly when you need it to create the stakes in the very next scene. And then like the next scene and the next scene and the next scene. And the stakes kind of all feed into each other. Like it's just so well done and worth studying. Maybe that'll be my lesson. I'll come back to it. But that being said, if you're focusing on distributing the information correctly, you're probably going to lose some thematic through lines as well. You're going to muddy some thematic through lines. You're going to muddy them. And also some character arcs. So I do think that's like a little bit of a whatever. Like I miss Mia. She departs the movie and then we see her so briefly in the Butch sequence where she's standing in like his dressing room or whatever. And, Vincent comes in, he's like, hey, how are you? And I'm like, no, stay with them. I want more of that. And then it's just over. There are things like that where because of the movie is again, so focused on what are the entertaining scenes and sequences, we're only keeping those. We're not keeping anything else, that things are lost on the way.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And I think it's weird because every time I've thought about this movie and the nonlinear structure, I'm sort of like, I should analyze it and try to find like the meaning behind it. And I'm like, no. I think it just is doing what it's doing. And that's totally fine. And when it works, as you're saying, it works really great. And it has this sort of, when we're dropped back in the diner and now we're with like Jules and Vincent and we're starting to hear that other conversation, it's like, oh man, like that's going to happen. Like that's doing that thing that you're talking about of like, suddenly the stakes are here and I'm like, what's going to happen next? And so that's keeping me engaged while, they're talking about this miracle that just happened. And so I think it is interesting. I also feel the absence of Mia because I think there is something really special about that sequence. And Alex, you sort of talked about the sort of almost dreamlike way it takes you into this crazy world. And that's kind of the one stylistic thing that I feel, and maybe it's just me, but in terms of the filmmaking difference between the Butch sequence and everything comes before, but like particularly the Vincent Mia sequence, there is this sort of, maybe because Vincent is like on drugs, but like everything feels a little weird. I'm not sure exactly how much of like what's happening is reality. And I think it's putting me into the headspace of the characters and this kind of a weird relationship that they're forming that there's so much stakes to it. Like it's a life or death relationship in some ways, but also there's this sweet earnestness of like two people like trying to find this connection in this weird, like out of time, space, like, Jackrabbit Slim's environment that, I just feel like all of the production design, cinematography, and performances, which we have to talk about, are amazing throughout this movie, is putting me in the headspace of these characters in a really like lovely way that makes me empathetic. And I feel like that flies out the window for me immediately when we switch to the Butch sequence. Like it feels like color palette wise, the way it's shot, it takes place really like at night a lot, and a lot of the movie doesn't.
Is it the rear projection in the taxi? Is it just that? Is it just that?
I think that's the most stark thing, because they do use that technique elsewhere, but
it's
you're dropped
really
in.
It's very driver, like old movie in your face.
Yeah. Like I felt like I was watching Sin City all of a sudden. Like, I don't know. It's just so weird.
Which also
stylistic.
is 3 different stories with a bookended story.
That's true. Yeah. Anyway, it's interesting how the style shifts for me also in that sequence. And I guess I'm just curious if you guys feel that way too, or if that's kind of an unfair like reading that I'm imposing on it.
I'll say that I think I actually do really like the scene with Butch and her name's Fabienne. Fabienne, in the hotel room, and there's something about it where it's a genuinely, I would say genuinely like kind of a sensual scene in a way that you don't see very often. We talk about how movies are kind of sexless nowadays, and I think
this one's
kind
not.
of. Yeah, exactly. But there's kind of this very honest sensuality in that scene. It's kind of like the playful weirdness of relationships comes through, and just the weird things that are talked about, and I want a pot and whatever. Like it's there's something very strange and earnest and lovely about it, and to me that still feels kind of in step with a kind of a real time. Interesting watching two characters doing these really naturalistic performances. It feels as part of the whole with the Mia and Vincent experience. But I think, other parts of, honestly, for me, the Christopher Walken monologue, while like great in some ways, also feels a little bit indulgent. And then I think there are more indulgent things in the Butch section that take me out of the hypnotic vibe. But I think that sequence, I don't know, I genuinely like that sequence and how real it feels in a way.
Yeah, and I'll just reiterate that I do think it, to me at least, as I was trying to look at this movie through a sort of morality lens, it did make me go, oh, right, this kind of person exists too. A person who's just like, I just want to kind of be happy and just go do. She's kind of turned on by the danger of it all and stuff. So obviously that's another layer to what's going on there. But I think it does say, if every character in this movie kind of exists in this same spectrum, here's a character who exists kind of somewhere else, right? And then again, whether or not that's trying to say anything thematically in the movie, I don't know, but it does feel like a breath of fresh air. Stylistically, to your question, Michael, I don't know, because I've seen this movie so much that it all looks like Pulp Fiction to me, so it's hard to answer that.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I think Fabienne is interesting. Because she's so childlike that it kind of disturbs me actually, and is also like kind of annoying and dumb.
Yeah. Are you real? Is that a real person?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, or just like get on the motorcycle. Like why are we still do you not understand? I don't know. There's several sequences where it feels like I am supposed to be enamored with them, but I've kind of met Butch in this context of he's backstabbed a criminal to double criminal him, and he's killed a man in the process, and he doesn't feel bad about it.
Right.
He's flirting with this crazy cab driver in this weird projection sequence, and then he goes.
She
to
feels
this,
out of a David Lynch movie.
She really
feels
does, yeah,
she's from Mulholland Drive. 100%.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's
different
what it feels like.
Arquette sister in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I'm in a different movie for a little bit there. And then it drops me off there, and she's asking, I don't know, pancakes and stuff. Anyway, it's interesting, and I feel like that's where there's with Jules and Vincent. I feel like we're meeting these people as humans, first, and then revealing the badness of them a little bit. We see them driving, and then we see them open the trunk and take out the guns, and it's oh, okay. But I feel like Butch, I guess we technically meet as a child who's expressionless and doesn't move, but I don't make that connection. I don't know. It's interesting. I feel like perhaps the way the characters are introduced is part of what sets me in a certain mode for them.
Well, and we're a little bit circling this here, but I think we really should talk about the casting. The Fabienne thing annoyed me too, or really just troubled me, because I was I'm sorry, is she 15? What's happening? I looked it up this time because it's always really bothered me. Her look is just so young, and the characterization is so young. But no, I mean, so she was, the actress was about 30 years old. Bruce Willis was about 40, so there's not a huge age gap there, especially in terms of Hollywood. And the characterization is really wide-eyed, but she's got the accent. She's clearly from somewhere else. So there's an English as a second language thing happening here. And also people are like this. People like this exist in this world. And I think it's important too, the scene where he's freaking out about her having left the watch, and she's in the corner of the room terrified and crying. And I think he becomes really menacing, and we're reminded, if we've been lulled into thinking that Butch is a good guy, we're reminded that no, Butch is not a good guy, by the way. Buckle in, everybody. Mm-hmm. We're going to see a lot more from Butch. And so I think that, again, doing those things at the same time actually works really effectively to kind of create this space where I don't really know, or where anybody could do anything, right? I don't feel like anybody has a moral code except for maybe Jules, but everybody else is kind of gonna do whatever's best in the moment, or do whatever is the most important thing for them to do in the moment. And so, yeah, I just think that that's really, I don't know. I think it's effectively done with that casting. Also, keep in mind, Die Hard was made in 1988. So Bruce Willis was John McClane. He's a big action star to American audiences at this point. And so the casting of Bruce Willis is doing something meta here. We're expecting that, really tough John McClane kind of swagger, maybe even some of the humor, which Butch doesn't have a sense of humor here for most of the movie. And I think that that's really interesting casting. The Travolta casting was inspired.
Yes. Just the hair, the outfit, everything about it is perfect. Yeah.
Everything. But basically, I read, like I said, I think half a dozen reviews from 1994 about this movie, and every single one of them mentioned Saturday Night Fever and John Travolta and who he was as an icon, right? Who he represented in American cinema up until this point. And I think it's just it's hard to overstate what it means to get the right person into the role. I'm thinking about a modern comp of something like casting Demi Moore in The Substance, right? And she got her first Oscar nomination. She means something. Demi Moore as an actress means something to us. And so putting her into this role that can sort of subvert how we see this actor is crucial. And Samuel L. Jackson really wasn't anybody at this. He kind of had like he had I want to say it was like a Spike Lee movie before this where he'd done a really interesting turn, but
he's in Goodfellas, which no one ever remembers until you're in the middle of watching Goodfellas.
Right.
You're
but
like,
he was basically the breakout. Like this is the role that made Samuel L. Jackson. And so there's so much that goes into this ensemble and the casting of each one of these individual characters. Like Amanda Plummer, like Honey Bunny is just, or sorry, Honey Bunny is just like, I couldn't be more obsessed with everything that she does in this movie. Like I would just
every
watch her
choice she makes in every line.
It's
like, I'm not going to kill anyone.
I'm not going to kill anybody. It's like so amazing. But yeah, I think I wish casting Oscars had existed. I wish they currently existed.
Right.
They will. They're supposed to be coming up here. But like long overdue for this kind of putting the magic together to make this happen.
Yeah. Speaking of Samuel L. Jackson, I mean, what an icon in this movie. So many individual lines that are so quotable because of his inspired delivery. Just, I mean, there's too many to count. And I think there's so many that are packed into that final diner scene. Yeah. You know, but he's like, which wallet is it? Someone say it because we're going to bleep or whatever. But just the way he delivers the line that follows that line.
Like, obviously, it's that one.
It's the most like beautifully perfect
I need that
delivery.
Wallet.
Yeah. It's just, it's the kind of performance that just feels like magic or like it's always existed because was there ever a world before Samuel L. Jackson spoke these words exactly this way?
Right.
It's like, how do you do that? You can't, I don't know how you can't intentionally create that. It just happens. And what happens in this movie with Samuel L. Jackson feels magic, iconic, timeless, amazing.
Their entire like remix songs of just, I don't remember asking you a goddamn thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Just there's something about the rhythm and the timing and like almost Shakespearean. It's just amazing.
Yeah. And every time I say something smart, my partner says, well, look at the big brain on Brian.
Yeah. Well, and I think what I appreciated, you know, because there are so many quotable, iconic lines, you kind of tend to focus on those. But I was really captivated by the little things that Samuel L. Jackson was doing. Like, he's so tuned in to the character arc that is happening. And like every line delivery and the meaning behind every little thing feels so like studied and purposeful and exactly right. And the same thing for John Travolta. Like, I kind of in my head was sort of like, John Travolta came out and it was like, oh yeah, it's cool. John Travolta, he's doing something. Breakout hit again. Your career's revitalized. But he's like dialed in. Like there's a lot of layers happening in all these scenes. And I think I didn't appreciate the depth of the performances between the two of them, the chemistry between them also. Like, it's not just within them, it's between them. And then Uma Thurman, like all these kind of supporting characters, I feel like for this Tarantino style to work, which is people sitting and talking, structure does
before they kill each other.
Right. Yeah, which is important. Structure, stakes, suspense, dialogue, all that is important. But if you don't enjoy watching the people doing it, it's not going to work. And I think the performances really go that extra mile of making these scenes that are so captivating, truly captivating, like top to bottom.
Big Rames too. Like,
we
mostly have
Rames.
To look at the back of his head. I think too much in this movie, like just show me his face. But everything he does is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, in the same way Fabian is a breath of fresh air, Harvey Keitel is a breath of fresh air. Where it's just like, here's someone who is not like a bumbling idiot like the rest of you fools. Like, here's someone who actually knows how to, it's going to show up in a tux and then like tell you how to actually clean everything up.
Yeah. I love that moment too, and you can see him acting it where he, you know, Travolta's like, say please. Like, you could say please.
Yeah.
He's like, sorry, what now? And but then, you know, we've been so trained by the movie at that point to expect like somebody stepping out of line into getting violently handled. And I just love the elegance again of the handling of all of it. It's lovely.
And he even does say please. Like the fact that he's like, I'm in charge here. I'm here doing you guys a favor. But also, sure, if that helps.
Sure, please. Just go do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a gentleman.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, why don't we move into lessons? So yes, what lessons are we going to take away from Pulp Fiction? Brian, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I do want to talk about the nonlinear structure only in the sense of orientation. I think I'll say, which is if you watch this movie once or 3 times, and someone says, "Tell me what all the scenes were in order," you wouldn't necessarily know. But whenever you're watching, for me, whenever I'm watching any sequence of this movie, I feel like I know exactly where I am, right? So it's like you cut from the opening, not the opening, but the opening Jules and Vincent scene to Paul's bar. They come in different outfits. Like, what happened, right? And then the first thing that happens is Paul says to Vincent, "Oh, I hear you're taking Mia out tonight," or whatever. It's like, okay, great. So we're still on that same storyline. We still know. We don't necessarily know exactly when we are. Well, I think it's taking her out tomorrow night. I'm taking her out tonight. So I think we know that like a day has passed. But more importantly, a conversation that has started is now continuing. We see Butch being asked to throw the fight. Then when we see Butch, he kills the guy in the ring, right? So it's kind of like, and then when we get to Act 3, we are seeing the middle of what we've seen of Jules and Vince so far, which again, you might be like, oh, okay, now we see how they get those clothes. I don't really remember when that happened. But Act 3 is all one story that moves forward. So I think that it's doing a good job of knowing how much nonlinear stuff to do, then still get away with it. Because I don't really feel disoriented watching the movie at all in terms of watching the character arcs, watching the stories move forward, even if I am actually going, now here's the middle of 2 scenes you've already seen before. And I think, we've talked about movies like Memento or Eternal Sunshine, where the nonlinear storytelling is literally the plot and the theme and the character arcs, because the characters are experiencing things out of order. But here, it is pretty clear. As you said, Trisha, like maybe you don't think about the fact that Vincent is about to die when you're watching that scene between them in the diner. But what we get from that is we get a sort of crisis sequence there with Vincent, and then Jules gets to have his final monologue with Vincent. He's not having it with a random person. Because Vincent has already died, right? So there is a lot of, I think, like Dunkirk does this, where it's like, we're going to do things out of order, but it feels like it's so that we can do this moment here, and we can do this moment here, and we can do this moment here. As you said, Trisha, you lose some things with that. But I think that there is a lot that you gain from it structurally and character arc-wise. But most importantly, I really appreciate that I don't feel disoriented watching this movie, because I feel like when I'm watching a character, I know where that character is in their journey, even if I'm actually seeing things out of order.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely my experience too, of like, if I were asked to tell you chronologically, like even as you were speaking now, I was like, oh wait, was like Vince was doing a bunch of drugs because he had a hard day because he killed Marvin that morning, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. So like but it also like kind of doesn't matter in the movie, and like almost like the way the scenes play out, it does sort of feel like a day in the life out of time anyway. And like I think the nonlinear is creating a mood that suits the subject matter. And as you're saying, you're always oriented in where our like central character is at, character arc wise, psychology wise, etc. And I think that is a unique thing in nonlinear storytelling, actually, to have it be as orienting as it is, given how out of order it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and all of this is related to my lesson, which is going to be the stakes, because I just couldn't get over them this time around. So we are introduced to Marcellus Wallace in that opening sequence with Jules and Vincent, where they tell this whole story about what happened to Tony Rocky Horror and the foot massage and everything. But I was paying close attention this time to how the information is played out in that scene, because it starts with Vincent going, "What's her name again?" And he goes, "Mia." And then he kind of tells this whole story. It's like, do you remember this guy? Blah, blah, blah. Threw him out a window, foot massage, all of this stuff. And then even then he says, what's her name again? When they're kind of standing at the door. And then I got to take her out tomorrow night. Like, and then to your point, Brian, so like we know Marcellus from that conversation about throwing this guy off the building, etc., with Mia. We also know they work for him. And when they walk in and they start confronting Brett and co, they're talking about Marcellus. Again, we still have not met Marcellus, right, at this point, except off screen. But we understand the stakes of this. This is not a person that you can pull anything over on. He will find out. He will react in the worst way possible. You will probably die. So we know that from the conversation about Mia. And then that also, we see that play out in the scene with Brett. So the stakes are so high, both when they walk into the scene with Brett and his cohorts, but then moving forward into the scene where Vincent is going to take Mia out. So we know Marcellus Wallace really well by definition. Then, or by, the way that he's been defined. Yeah, sure. Then we see the scene where we're mostly looking at the back of Ving Rhames' head, but we're hearing him telling Butch to throw the fight. We know this is Marcellus Wallace. We have already just seen at least 2 people murdered violently because they tried to steal his briefcase. We know he threw another guy off a building for touching his wife's feet. Now we're in the scene where he's telling Butch to throw the fight. And so we understand the stakes if Butch does not throw the fight. It's going to happen much later, but even in the scene comes loaded with stakes. You do not cross this guy. You do not say boo to Marcellus Wallace ever. Then Vincent and Jules come in. They're in the different clothes. Don't ask what happened. And to your point, Brian, the first thing the bartender says is, hey, I hear you're taking out Mia. Mm-hmm. He's like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And then the bartender goes, have you met her? And I go, ooh, Vincent's going to have a problem. Right. Like he thinks he's not going to have a problem, but he's going to have a very serious problem. Because, again, the movie is seeding in the stakes. So that by the time he walks into Marcellus Wallace's very nice house, I have a very clear understanding it's Vincent's life if he ends up putting a toe out of line with Mia Wallace. Like,
literally.
It's incredibly clear. And so, like, the scene where he's then in the bathroom deliberating about what he's going to do at the end of the night, well, we know that she's also snorting the heroin. It's just like the stakes could not possibly be higher and so clear. And the movie is great at that kind of constantly reminding you of what the stakes are. What are the stakes? What's happening here? Not just like Marcellus is going to murder you, but a wide variety of things. Bonnie's coming home in 90 minutes. Like, it could be anything, right? Like, you could just have Jimmy, Quentin Tarantino's character. You could just having him be mad. Like, he's mad, whatever. He doesn't want this situation in his garage. But the Bonnie,
ticking clock. Yeah.
There's a ticking clock. There's stakes. If she comes home, everyone's going to jail. He's getting divorced. Blah, blah, blah. There's stakes, stakes, stakes. The same thing with the diner scene. We've already seen what happens in the diner scene so that when we're dropped back into it, we know. We know. We always know the stakes. And this movie is fantastic at it. If Butch is going to go back and get the watch, he's going to go back and get the watch. Like, the stakes couldn't be clearer and they couldn't be higher. It's a masterclass.
Yeah, and without ever any character actually saying them a lot of the time, right?
Exactly right.
Which isn't saying like he's not literally saying like I have to go and do this thing and I might die, da. It's like, no, we already know that. It's already been established. I was thinking like the foot massage conversation is one funny and entertaining, but also like we talked about exposition through conflict, right? Usually the exposition through conflict means the conflict is about the exposition. Here it kind of is, but it's more about like them having a conversation about like how sensual is a foot massage and like disagreeing about it. But what they're actually doing, what Tarantino is actually doing, is giving us a very clear idea of who Mia and Marcel is. Mia is the kind of person maybe who would let someone do this, like, right? So like maybe she is going to be flirty. Marcellus is not going to be happy, but it's like the way that it's delivered is through this like goofy conversation, right? And I think even like the catch-up joke, it's like, oh, we know what the function of this moment is. It's not her saying like, you know what, I trust you now or whatever. Like I feel like it's just like, I'm going to tell you a thing I wasn't going to tell you before. And I have a whole thing about the racial slurs where I'm like, there's no function. They're not actually doing anything functionally, right? Whereas in other movies, it's like, this is the character who says this kind of thing. This is da-da-da. And I'm just like, no, they're just there. Don't need to get into it. But I was literally like, what purpose are they actually serving? That's a whole other conversation for another day.
Not to get into that conversation, but I think that's part of why the Tarantino cameo use of the slurs feels like the worst, because I can see it. I can feel it in other scenarios with other characters speaking the words. I can feel like, okay, this is part of their world.
Also, Eric Stoltz was the other character, you might say, who is like one of the only other white characters who says that in this movie.
Yeah, but it's just like, what is this Tarantino character? Why is he in this movie? What's his deal? And why is his monologue like almost like built around this? That's where it feels like,
yeah. Well, and there's a lot of racial slurs like for lots of groups of people throughout, and I think that is I think the argument could be made of like, oh, it's so much fun when Butch gets revenge on these people for this terrible thing that they did. And it's like, well, Tarantino, you made them do that terrible thing.
Right.
Like you get to select, as Trish, you said in one of the recent episodes, the director's job is to focus our attention on things. And as the writer, you are choosing what to bring in to your story world and what not to. And it's hard to not judge a little bit. Like, what are you bringing into this world and why? Is it necessary? If not, what are you really trying to do? It can never truly, I'm not going to pretend like I think it's unfair to assume intentions a lot of the time, but in practice and a lot of Tarantino work, it does feel unnecessary for the storytelling, how he brings it in.
It's like, let me see what I can get away with. Same with the violence, same with a lot of what he does. That's what I
was going to say.
He's pushing boundaries.
Yeah, the shock value is the shock value.
Exactly.
And like, if it's not shocking, then it doesn't have shock value. And so I do think that it's one of the most like, it never quite feels, I think, as calculated as you might want for a thematic reason. To your point, Brian, is that like the level of the violence, the level of the gore, the offensive dialogue, it feels transgressive for its own sake or for like entertainment's sake as part of a package, but not in like a very studied way. Tarantino has seen a lot of movies. I'm not suggesting he hasn't. What I'm saying is that each one doesn't feel like it's there. Each one doesn't feel like it's there for a specific reason, right? In the way that some other filmmakers, Coen brothers come to mind, who don't use racial slurs. They do use violence, but in a very calculated way. I just want to say.
Yeah, or other filmmakers who are using characters who are speaking things that are deplorable, but it's part of a honesty about a scenario or a type of person or a time and place.
Yep.
And that's where, just once again, the randomness of who uses the slurs and when and why makes it not about that here.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was going to say. If it's Django Unchained, different story, like doesn't mean, the argument a lot of time
more
becomes
problematic, maybe.
Well, sure. but the argument becomes, well, that's the way people talk. And that's what, it's like, these people talk however the screenwriter decides they talk, right? Like I said, Tarantino had sort of invented this whole universe, so it's up to him how these people talk. And then if everyone is doing it and not just like, we're going to very pointedly insert this word here and here, if everyone's doing it, then it's really only in your script because you want to, or because you think it's funny, or because you like it, right? Or shock value just for the sake of shock value, right? And none of those things is awesome. Is the end of my thoughts.
Right. Yeah. Maybe don't use things like that just for shock value. Like, that doesn't feel like a respectful way to use, things of cultural meaning.
Right.
Correct.
There's one other thought I was going to say. Alex, what did you just say? There's something you said.
Well, I mean, I think, I'm not for, like, I don't like.
Yes.
There is a flattened version of this critique, which is like the presence of bad things equals like you are a bad person, director. Like there was a really dumb critique of Zero Dark 30, where it's like this film shows that they tortured somebody to get information. Like this film is condoning torture because like it led to Osama bin Laden getting
Those
killed.
are two different things.
It's like, no, like I think it's interesting that the movie suggests that maybe torture was used to achieve this goal. And like, that's, what do we feel about that? That doesn't mean the director, Catherine Bigelow, like approves of torture. And so, I think there's a flattened version of this critique, which is that exists in this movie, therefore you bad. But I think what we're identifying is that, you can feel when things exist for a reason or not.
Right.
And maybe we can judge you a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. And I think it was just the anachronism thing that you were talking about, Brian, of like people who like in Django were like, that's how people talked. Like it's realistic for the time. It's like nothing else about that movie is realistic for the time. So like they weren't playing that music anyway. So
when he shotguns that lady and she like flies across the room, like that's not realistic. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
This is a
Tarantino
universe. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, what's your lesson?
I just want to go back to Honey Bunny, Amanda Plummer. We mentioned how inspired that performance is right from the very beginning. That's part of why that first scene is so captivating. It's just so much fun to watch her. But I also just think her character and her function in the finale is so well done, where it's like, when you have this situation where there's multiple guns pointed in multiple different directions, Tarantino is so good, and Coen Brothers do this as well, where just having at least one of those people be completely unpredictable, maybe a little bit unstable, and an accident could happen at any second if somebody like sneezes or breathes wrong. And I just love the energy she brings to that scene, just frantically kind of doesn't know where to point the gun when John Travolta enters the picture. They're like, be cool, honey buddy, be cool. And I think there's something so smart about, and I think Tarantino does this quite often, where just has somebody in a scene with life and death stakes, multiple guns pointed in multiple different directions, where you just don't know what the hell could happen, because any second this wild card could slip up, pull the trigger, and then all hell is going to break loose. And I just think she's such a key component of why that final scene works and why it's so great.
Yeah. And I feel like the work that's done in that first scene like makes you empathetic to her also. Like you're
totally
with her. Like
she's a human criminal.
Yeah.
Right. All of these characters you are with and empathetic toward. And that's partially why that is such an intense scene.
That's such a Tarantino thing too, is just like several people could die at any second for a 20-minute long scene. And it's just like, where is this going to go? When is it going to happen? When is something going to happen? Because it is.
Yeah.
Michael.
Yeah. I often think about the first act of your movie and kind of the first 10, 15 minutes. I think you start off a story with a little bit of goodwill currency from the audience. And I think it's important to spend it wisely, because I think after that period, the audience is like, okay, well, I've given you a shot. Like I came here, I want this to be good, but if I'm not going to do all the work for you. I feel like this movie spends its goodwill currency so well and so effectively of just making the first minutes of your movie grab the audience, make it generous, make it fun, make it entertaining, pull you in and ask questions and, introduce dramatic questions that you want to know the answers to. And this movie, I feel like, is among a masterclass of being lots of things, how to start a movie and how to pull you in. Like you're dropped into a scene where people are talking in a cafe for 4 minutes, that could be really boring. It's not. It's really like engaging and entertaining. It's structured. It's building towards something. It's like kind of seducing you into its world. Smash cut to Pulp Fiction, play the music, roll into Vincent Jules, and then you're there, and it just has you. And it's just one of the best like opening 15 minutes of a movie ever. And I think just a really good example of that philosophy of make it fun from the beginning. It's got to do work. There's a lot of utility happening here, but like spend that goodwill and make the audience want to keep investing in this story because it's worthwhile. And this movie's great at that.
Just dropping us into the middle of something.
Yeah.
We're not starting from the beginning of the scene where they're walking in and getting a table. No, we're just dropping right into the middle of it.
Right. And like that's disorienting, but I think especially at the beginning of a movie, maybe I have the energy or the curiosity at least to be like, okay, what are you doing here? Like you're using that to a good end, I think. And yeah, it's just really good. What else have you guys been watching? Trisha, what have you been watching recently?
I'm going to tell the truth.
Uh-oh. Okay.
It's fine.
I hate two of you.
Episode 200, I was like, I'm going to tell these guys what I think. No, I have needed something comforting to put on before I go to bed at night. And these big swings have taken up a lot of my time, is the other thing. Yeah. So when I'm not watching one of these big swing movies, I've been watching Antiques Roadshow.
Nice.
Oh,
nice. I like Antiques Roadshow. It's like you can watch it on PBS, on your PBS app, or you can actually watch full episodes on YouTube also. It's really easy to do. They're still making them. There's new ones coming out all the time. Oh. And you know what? It's PBS, and PBS has the capability of reaching, creating programming that reaches people that don't watch other kinds of shows. And so watching it, they do like these little vignettes where they're like, and now we're going to go to this historical museum that's near the town we're in for people bringing us their antiques and whatever. And then they're going to do something that's like really enlightening. It's like, this used to be, this oppressed people's whatever, and here's their art, and here are their artifacts, and they're still here. Here's someone giving a tour about their thing. And like, I don't know, it's just kind of a travel show in that way, but it also feels like it's doing something of some import that I could use. And it's also lovely, and it's easy viewing, and it's so nice to see someone like crying over their grandmother's thing that is actually worth something. And it's just beautiful. I don't know. It's beautiful. Watch Antiques Roadshow if you, like me, are tired every day.
I was supposed to say it's not what I'm watching, but I just watched Attenborough and the Giant Sea Monster, which is David Attenborough. Like they extract a plesiosaur skull, which is like a prehistoric whale gator thing, and then they just like talk about it and talk about like restoring it and stuff. And I'm just like, man, I'm just watching like a 97-year-old dude be fascinated about something that he's been fascinated about since he was like 12, and it's so comforting.
Yeah.
Nice. Yes. Comforting is important.
Yeah.
Well, what are you watching? What have you been watching, Brian?
Well, it's been a minute since I've recommended a music documentary. So I'll say that I watched Becoming Led Zeppelin, which is on Netflix. And I'm a big Led Zeppelin fan, but they're also a band that I don't know a ton about. It's like I know the general, like who they are, where they're from, who the people are, but I didn't really know their history. So it was really cool for me to actually, learn about a lot of that. And it's called Becoming Led Zeppelin because it really is like from the beginning of them getting into music and meeting each other to like the release of their second album, and then it just stops. I'm like, where's the rest of this trilogy? I want to see the whole story. And yeah, like normally I'd say if you're not interested in the band, like don't bother watching the documentary about the band, obviously. But this one, the first half, they really go into the evolution of what would become modern rock or hard rock as it sort of became like from like the 70s through to the like 90s where it kind of solidified even more. So it's like you're seeing these snippets of blues videos and rock and roll and even like folk and country, where it's just around the 60s, everything's getting a little edgier and a little faster. And it's almost like you're seeing the shoulders that then like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and whoever would stand on to then create this new genre of music. But really it was just kind of the next part of the conversation. It was just a little bit of a jump. So for that, it's almost like I'd say like watch the first 40 minutes of this documentary and then turn it off if you really don't care about Led Zeppelin. If you care at all about Led Zeppelin, you definitely watch it. If you care a lot about Led Zeppelin, you might not learn anything new. So that's a recommendation based on where you're at. But yeah, really enjoyed it. Becoming Led Zeppelin on Netflix.
Nice.
Nice.
Sounds interesting. Very cool. Alex, what have you been watching?
I want to recommend a podcast this week. It's a New York Times podcast series called The Protocol. And it's a really interesting and I think very valuable educational series to listen to about a really hot button issue, which is kind of trans youth. And it's been, trans youth have been used in this as this like political, lightning rod in recent elections in America, and what kind of healthcare should be given, at what age, and what's it's really complicated. And I think in our social media era, everything is simplified into the worst version of a debate that is possible. And this is a really thoughtful, really well, really good journalism happening here. Series about the kind of the history of helping trans youth and different protocols in different countries, and how kind of America maybe has, as we often do, has screwed things up. And so it's just, I would just say, if you are thinking about this issue or concerned about this issue, you should be educated about it. And The Protocol is a really beautifully done education about this thing that has been in the news way more than it should be for such a small population in our country, because it is a very convenient way to activate people politically. But yeah, The Protocol, New York Times podcast series. I think it's available to anybody, not just subscribers, but I think it's really worth a listen.
Interesting. That sounds cool.
Yeah, they put the first episode on the daily, which is how I found out about it. But there's more episodes. Yeah.
Nice. Cool.
Michael.
Yes. Well, it's episode 200, and for many an episode, I've slid in a jab here or a jab there.
Oh boy, here it is.
About Andor.
It's Andor.
And the frustration that I had with season 2, which was like, oh my God, the best thing ever and the best thing to ever happen to Star Wars. And I've complained about how nothing happens, and there are entire episodes that could be, a scene. And so I wasn't going to watch season 2. And then once again, people were like, no, it's the best Star Wars has ever been since forever. And I watched the first 3 episodes, and Alex warned me, like, they're slow. And I was like, yeah, they are. These 3 episodes could have been 2 scenes. 2 scenes is all you need to do these 3 hours of stuff that you spent. Mon Mothma dances for like 70 minutes. I get it. Anyway.
Don't you need every stage of the Chandrillan wedding over 3 episodes, Michael?
Yes. It's the opposite of what we were just talking about. A drop you in the middle with like Pulp Fiction in the opening. So just the frustration was very real. And I was like, but I have to power through, because Andor is the best thing to happen to Star Wars in decades. By the end, Andor is the best thing to happen to Star Wars in decades.
You were setting that up like with now the expectation.
We got him.
Yeah. The whatever happened after episode 3, it really all fell into place. I feel like it just got better with every episode. The pacing was really nice. The aesthetics of it were really cool. The story is very relevant, and I think that helps it a lot. The last 3 episodes, I believe, are directed by Alonso Ruiz Palacios. I'm probably saying his name wrong.
Palacios.
But Palacios, thank you. The directing is beautiful. Like, it's just really well executed. The performances throughout have been good, and it's just that the actors didn't have scenes where anything happened. Once they had scenes where things happened, it was really, really great. It was really strong. I feel like it manages to fix a lot of my issues with Rogue One. Like I couldn't help but as
You put it
season
on.
2
You
ends,
just have to do. You just put it
start
right
Rogue One,
on.
and it was
Everybody
like,
does.
Yeah. And it's like, oh yeah, this is what Rogue One needed to fix a lot of my issues with it. And I think it even makes the original Star Wars better because of the investment that you have in the rebellion. And so I'm impressed just that they made a good show, but that also they took such care to set up and hand off to the original trilogy, to Rogue One. I was very impressed by it. So doesn't make all the other parts better, but by the end it was definitely worth it. So, Andor season 2, thumbs up from Michael. Okay, hello listener. I know nothing has changed for you, but on our side, we just paused for 5 minutes and then debated about whether or not to do what we're about to do, which is commit to talking about Andor season 2 for our August Patreon exclusive episode.
Yay.
Yes.
People
have been asking for it in the Discord, and we're going to do it. We're going to talk about Andor.
And
Yes.
Michael doesn't hate it. That's the real takeaway here.
Not all of it, at least.
Not all of it, at least. There's still room for an arc to go on. I can still be grumpy for at least some of the conversation. Anyway, so I'm excited about that. Thank you, Brian, for bringing that up. There was a whole lot of hubbub that you guys missed that we edited out, but we committed to it. We're doing it
for 5 minutes and then going Andor.
Andor season 2 will be our August Patreon. So if you want to make sure that you don't miss it, head over to the Beyond Screenplay Patreon and sign up to get monthly exclusives like this Andor season 2 retrospective. And then we're done, right? I think I talked about what we're watching.
I mean, I think it's worth mentioning that 2 of our other Tarantino episodes are also over on the Patreon. Our Reservoir Dogs, which we did back in 2022, which I mentioned, and of course, our Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Infamous.
Infamous amongst
episode.
at least the 4 of us.
Which I did-
Will you take the high road or the low road?
Which I did not re-listen to, but is probably going to be a fun one if anybody wants to check that out.
It's a hot take in a hot apartment.
It sure was.
Well, when the
With
liquor
hot people.
flowed a little bit more loosely while recording. Yes, so that's over on the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. So is Andor. If you haven't listened to our earlier episode on Cloud Atlas from our Big Swing Summer, that was really fun to talk about. We're going to be back next week with The Fountain to round out our Big Swing Summer. That's going to be interesting. I have not seen it since, I don't know, the last time Alex made me watch it, 15 years ago, probably. So looking forward to
93
that.
minutes. Oh, man. Like,
93?
yeah. See, you can do
All
a big
right.
swing in under 2 and 7 more hours.
He packs a lot into 90 minutes.
Amazing. We want to say a big thank you, as always, to the patrons that make this show possible. Thank you to our producer, Vince Major. Thank you to our editors, Vicky Lewis and Mike Wuerth, and the whole Nebula Studios team. I'm Michael Tucker, and I've been joined today by Trisha Rand, Rand Bittner, and Alex Calleros. And we will see you in the next episode for our discussion of The Fountain.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, everybody. Trisha here. If you're listening to this on the day or the week that it is coming out, then I wanted to let you know really quickly that I am going to be at San Diego Comic-Con in a few days. And you should come by and see me. I'm going to get to do a panel called The Hidden Value of a Director's Cut. And I'm really excited about it. I'll be there on Thursday, July 24th at the Neil Morgan Auditorium at 4 p.m. The Neil Morgan Auditorium is in the San Diego Central Library, and I cannot wait to be on this panel and discuss all the good and the bad and the ugly of director's cuts. So if you're going to be at San Diego Comic-Con, come on by and say hi.